Welcome to the 2020 Greensteading Summit presented by the Green Dream Project. This is a special series of videos featuring permaculturists, homesteaders, farmers, gardeners, and people dedicated to sustainable living. We thank you so much for joining us.
Hi friends, Tom Wiley here. I'm known as the Handy Homesteader because I combine my years of experience building and remodeling homes, inventing and fixing things, with a passion to put real-life skills into the hands of the next generation of homesteaders. Today I'm going to talk about some really important things to consider when you're laying out infrastructure on your homestead. Whether you are moving on to an established piece of property and homesteading on it, or farming on it, or you're building a place from scratch like we did a couple years ago, there are things you need to think about in order to set yourself up for success in the long term. I'm also going to give you several practical tips on fixing up a neglected home or outbuildings on your property. Then I'm going to share details of improvements I've made to some of the most popular types of chicken tractors, making them easier and more efficient to use. This includes the stress-free chicken tractor from John Suscovich, the Salatin style chicken tractor, as well as aspects of Justin Rhodes chickshaw. I'm also going to show you how to move huge heavy things around on your homestead without a tractor. All of us have big stuff to move around, whether we're first setting up our homestead or just running it from day to day. But not all of us have access to a tractor or a forklift. Well, neither do I, so I'm going to show you my favorite tool that I use almost every day on my homestead to get work done without killing my back. Finally, I'm going to demonstrate the Paul Bunyan wood chopper, which is a unique, manually operated log splitter that I designed and built out of scrap metal and junk car parts. I exhibited this machine in the 2019 North Idaho State Fair and surprised everyone with how easy it made the task of splitting firewood, even for my wife. I'll show you that a machine like this can be built by anyone with basic metalworking knowledge and simple tools. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my family and how we got to this homesteading journey we're on. My wife Sarah and I remodeled and sold our suburban Spokane, Washington home and moved on to 5 raw acres of rural North Idaho property. Our dream was to homestead from the ground up. More from necessity, just because we couldn't afford a place with a house already on it that was in good condition. So we decided to try doing it all from scratch. Boy, were we in for a lot of work. The two of us, plus 2 toddlers and a newborn, plus a huge Great Pyrenees puppy, ended up living in a fifth-wheel RV for 12 months while we put in all the infrastructure for building that homestead from scratch. A well, septic system, a driveway, land clearing before all of that, and bringing power onto the property. We put in all the infrastructure for building our future house, built a makeshift tiny house, and connected it to our RV so we could heat with wood in the winter, built a shipping container shop, and made it through a tough, cold winter in the snow belt of North Idaho. Upon emerging into spring, though, we decided to skip ahead a bit and trade that property for a rundown 7-acre homestead that already had everything we needed on property, except it was even more rural and all of it needed to be fixed up. We've dealt with leaky roofs and plumbing systems, flooded outbuildings, power outages, vehicle breakdowns, frozen pipes, clogged septic systems, and even a nearby brush fire that recently threatened our property. So coming from this unique perspective of having built all the infrastructure for a property and then also fixed up an existing property, I can definitely speak from experience on the importance of an intentionally planned property, as well as what to do if you find yourself on a property that was not so thoroughly thought out. Hey guys, I'm just going to jump in right here and let you know how much I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. We're 2/3 of the way through August right now. It's a super busy time of the year for us homesteaders and farmers. Because of that, I want to really respect your time in this video. I'm not going to take a bunch of time in between clips and introduce titles and have, I don't want to bore you to death with PowerPoint slides. I'm just trying to give you actionable information that you can use right away on your homestead this year or maybe even this week. So because of that, I don't want you to worry about trying to take notes and worry about missing things as we dive through today's content. I'm going to be going through at a really brisk pace, trying to just pack as much as I can into this next hour. So because of that, I've already taken notes for you in the form of a downloadable PDF that you can download for free and keep forever. I recommend that you go right now to tomwiley.org/greensteading summit and download that PDF. That will give you more of the structure and the flow of what we're going through. Print this PDF, scribble on it and write on it and do whatever. That will help us just speed through today's content and make the most of our time together. Sound good? All right, let's get back to it. All right, let's get into tips on laying out the infrastructure for your property. Now, whether you are building a property from scratch or already working with an established place, you have an opportunity to still arrange the pieces and parts that make up your homestead or farm to become a place that you actually enjoy living and working at. There's a lot of moving pieces that go into a property that is self-sustaining, regenerative, and productive for you and your family and your community. It's worth taking the time to figure out how you want to position things from the get-go. Or simply to pause and take a moment to assess where your property's at right now and start coming up with a plan for how you can gradually improve things over time. Now, it may not be obvious, but the first thing you really want to do on a piece of property that's new to you is establish where the borders are. This is not only important for figuring out what space you have to work with, but also making sure you don't encroach on neighboring properties or mess up separations that have to be between your well and your septic system and things like that. We actually really struggled with this on our first property because it was so heavily wooded on basically 3 edges of it that it was really hard to see from once we found the corner pins on the property. It was hard to establish straight lines between them all. So the first thing you want to do is get a hold of a plat map or survey if one exists for your property, and it should. You just need to go to your county or the planning department and ask for it. You might also be able to download it directly from a website somewhere. So search that out, try to get a hold of it, and that will really help you determine where exactly your borders are. In my experience, often you can end up finding the corner pins, which will often be a plastic cap on top of a piece of rebar. Sometimes it can be a metal stamped cap, and it'll be stamped with a number. You can match that number up with the number shown on your plat map and get some reasonable assurance that that is indeed the corner of your property. And once you've got those corners established, it's a matter of connecting the dots and making straight lines between those points so you know for sure where your borders are. Now, some helpful tools for this would be a long tape measure. I'm talking like 300 feet. Something nice and long, or even a rangefinder. I've used a laser rangefinder to get a ballpark on, okay, where should this next corner pin be, so I can have an idea and then go hunt it down. For walking a straight line, honestly, you can get as simple as using a compass. Google orienteering with a compass and watch some videos on it, and then go out in the woods and practice walking an absolutely straight line, as straight as you can go. That'll really help you get through some of the confusion of being in the woods and feeling like your line that you think is straight should go over here when really the line goes that way. There are also apps that you can get that work with GPS to, as closely as possible triangulate your position and where your property line actually is. I haven't used any of those. I've heard people using them and swearing by them. I've found a couple to be off in accuracy though, based on my actual real life observation of our property lines and then what somebody showed me on their app what our property is supposed to be, and it was off like 15 or more feet. So take those with a grain of salt. It also depends on how good your connection is to either GPS or a cell signal. So those can be helpful, but I wouldn't bank on them 100%. I would try to establish, an actual physical line that you can walk, and eyeball that it's truly straight. Once you get a line established, you can clear brush along it. Make sure you ask for, permission from your neighboring property owner to make sure he or she is okay with you clearing brush along there. Maybe they even want to come help with it and establish that line. Clear a line so you can see where your property is. I would recommend then posting no trespassing signs along that edge. That'll not only help you visually see where your property line is, but it also helps people know that they're not welcome to just come on into your land without permission. So what I've done on our raw property was establish the corner points, and then I walked with a compass as straight as I could between those points and established as close as I could get to a straight line. And I marked that line with pieces of wood lath, tapped into the ground and marked with a Sharpie marker. And then I actually flew an RC airplane above the property with a GoPro camera strapped to the top of it, flying upside down to capture whatever I could of a picture looking straight down on my property to see if the lines I had laid out were anywhere near square and straight. And they were actually pretty decent. So especially now in the day of affordable drones, that can actually be an incredibly helpful tool to give you a bird's eye view of your property and if your lines are actually straight that you're trying to establish. Keep in mind that a bunch of drones will have a fisheye lens on it, so it'll distort the image and make your straight lines look bowed. So keep that in mind, adjust it in the settings if you can, and or just try flying directly above the line instead of off to the side, because the further you get off center, the more curved a straight line will appear on camera. The next thing you need to do once you have your property lines established is figure out what basic required setbacks you need to have. You might have a setback of 15 feet from a property line, and that is as close as you can build a building to that property line. You'll also have setbacks of distance between a property line and your septic tank or drain field, between your well and your neighbor's septic tank or drain field. So there's a lot of things that go into it. Each county is different, so contact your local planning department, figure out what those setbacks and required distances are, and maintain them. It is not worth the cost of having to move a structure or re-dig a well or a septic system just because you got it 5 feet off. So in laying out your property, I would highly recommend using a computer software such as Google SketchUp, which you can get for free, or other tools like that. Use some kind of a digital tool to actually build out the space of your property virtually. That can be an excellent way of arranging the big pieces of your property and figuring out the logistics of how things are going to flow through your property, whether or not you're going to have enough room for things, and so on. I actually did this with our raw property up north. I built the entire property and the buildings that we wanted to make on Google SketchUp as a 3D model. So then I exported that into a 2D map, basically, of my property, so I could actually take measurements and figure out how to do things with a scale representation of what our plan was for that property. That really helped when it came to making decisions on where the septic tank would be, where the drain field needed to go, telling the excavator where our driveway needed to be scratched in. It really helped figure all that out and have some concrete things in place that I could measure off of and figure out things by, instead of just having it all based on guesstimates or rough sketches on napkins. So the first thing to establish or think about on your homestead are the big items like your house, your shop, a barn if you've got it, pasture land, any bodies of water like pond or lake or creek. Figure out where all those things are in relation to each other, where you want them to be in relation to each other, and then start figuring out how they interconnect, where power lines run or where you want them to run, where you can establish underground plumbing for bringing water in and out of buildings, etc. But it's important to start with those big items and then work down from there, because those are the things that are going to be harder to move later for obvious reasons. Now, just like picking a spot to pitch your tent in a campground, find the high spots to build your buildings on. As attractive as a low-laying meadow on your property can be for placing your house, you really want to keep water drainage in mind. It can be incredibly complicated and expensive trying to figure out how to establish drainage to keep your house from flooding that you put in the lowest spot on your property, and that's where water is naturally going to collect. It's far easier if you can find even a spot that's higher on your property, even if not the highest, so that water just naturally drains away. Your house or shop or animal pens are not where you want water to collect. Now, obviously, you need to move things around on your property. You need to back in trucks and trailers. You need turnarounds. So keep those in mind in laying things out. I actually changed my plan a couple times on our raw property when I realized this is going to be really difficult to get big trailers in, namely the shipping containers I was going to build our shop out of. So keep that in mind. Try not to make a super windy road with a lot of tight turns that you will need to access later for getting big things into. One big thing to consider in northern climates is where are you going to push the snow? On both of our properties thus far, this has been a huge issue. It really makes me wish that the property we're currently on was laid out slightly differently, but we got to work with what we have. And so I'm finding new places and different ways to plow the snow so that the big piles of snow and the snow berms end up in places where they're less in the way and I'm able to work around them. This can be a very big deal, not only for dealing with the snow berms during the winter, as well as where's all that water going to go once it melts? Is it going to go straight into the foundation of your house? Or is it going to run off a hillside harmlessly? Or can you harvest it and feed it slowly to your garden throughout the spring and get some free watering out of it? So a lot of things to consider there. Another big thing to think about is just how are you going to handle the flow of materials around your homestead. If you're building property, this is going to be really big. Where are you going to stockpile stacks of plywood and lumber and trusses and stuff like that? So that's a consideration when you're building. But even when you're just running a homestead day to day, where are you going to, if you have a tractor, where are you going to park it and keep implements for it? If you have extra vehicles or trailers, where are you going to park those where they're accessible but also out of the way? I would recommend, though, that as much as possible, try to establish storage areas along the sides of a road versus at the end of a dead-end road. I ended up having to do that some on our first property just out of necessity, where the only road that had been carved in had a big dirt berm at the end of it, so it was definitely a dead end. But that's where I needed to stage a bunch of materials and building supplies. So I ended up having to park at that berm and transport material by hand up over the dirt berm and out into the woods in a spider web around that dead end, and it was really, really a pain. It also made it so that a lot of that stuff was basically inaccessible during the winter when I couldn't just easily plow a path back there. I had to walk through the snow, dig it out by hand, and then carry stuff out by hand back to the road. So try to put things along the sides of roads or paths so you can just pull a trailer right up next to whatever you want to load or unload and deal with it very easily. Now also, if you're in a climate that gets cool in the wintertime, you're going to need to stock up firewood, and you're going to need an easy place to keep it that you can both access for processing that firewood and stocking up on it during the warm season, and then be able to get at it easily in the winter without having to move a ton of snow by hand. So again, arranging your wood stacks along the side of a road or driveway, or on the side of an open field that you can plow, so you can easily get trucks or trailers right next to your stack of wood. One thing I didn't think about on our property until the second winter we were going through was that our firewood was stored on the north side of a building. That meant that the sun never shone on our firewood, and so it made it a lot harder to get it to dry fast. So if possible, if you're in the northern hemisphere, try to store things that you're trying to dry, like firewood, on the south side of a building, or at least not on the north shady side. That will really help when it comes to trying to dry and season your firewood. Now, if you're establishing a property from scratch, one of the big things you're going to deal with is the cost of bringing in power or water to your property. That can get very costly, so make sure you know in advance what it costs per 100 feet or whatever to run power lines, place transformers, do whatever you need to do, so that you aren't surprised by a several $1,000 bill that you weren't expecting. This actually helped make the decision on where we placed our home on our previous property. The transformer was on one corner of the property. We were initially planning on putting our house almost at the opposite corner, so it would have cost a fortune to bring in power all that way. We ended up just needing to trim things down and make a simple straight driveway toward the back of the property from where that transformer was, bring in a short underground power line from that junction box to our pump house, and then distribute power from there. Now, something to be aware of is that it'll cost different amounts to either have the power company bring a cable directly in, or have the power company bring a cable to an initial service site where you can have your electrical service, and then you can distribute power from there just using a local electrician to do the work versus having the power company do it. The cost difference can be huge. Also keep in mind that wherever you put your well, you're going to need to get power to it and water from it. So that can be very expensive. If it has to be really far away from all the places where you're going to use water, you're going to spend a lot of money trenching and putting in all that pipe and wire to make that all come together. Now, something that a friend helped me realize when I was establishing our first property was to think about fire prevention and your ability to fight a possible fire from the get-go. He and I had a mutual friend who had a barn catch on fire, and their well pressure tank and controls were housed inside that barn. So it wasn't long before they lost water on their property and couldn't even fight the fire. So as much as I don't like having to heat and maintain a separate building on my property just for the well pressure tank and controls, I actually recommend doing that. That way, if either your shop or your house or anywhere else on your property catches fire, so long as it's not the pump house, then you still should have the ability to do something toward fighting that fire. It actually worked really well on our first property that I made the pump house the place where the electrical service both came in and we had our meter there, and then power was distributed from there. I also put the well pressure tank and controls in that building also. So I had easy access to electricity, both to power the well pump and the controls for that, as well as putting a space heater in there to keep the place warm. I also then created a generator hookup on the outside of that building so I could house a generator there, and from that central point distribute power to anywhere on my property simply by flipping breakers. Now, something I realized on the Christmas Eve that our pressure tank system froze and we lost water on our property was that you don't actually have to insulate an entire building in order to keep your plumbing system from freezing. If you do things right, you can localize all your plumbing to one area and then build a box around that using styrofoam insulation and actually have a little zone that you can heat quite easily with a little space heater or even a heat lamp, and it won't cost all that much to keep going. I finally did that in that pump house, and it saved me a ton because I wasn't having to heat the entire 12 by 8 foot structure. I was just heating a space the size of a washing machine and a dryer next to each other. Something also to consider as far as water distribution, gravity is your friend. If you can either elevate a tank up on a tower, up on legs, or even just up a hillside, then you have 100% free pressurized water, at least somewhat pressurized water, that you can use at any time of the year, so long as it's not frozen. So try to think about this as you're establishing where your water lines are going to go. Think about how you can make gravity flow water around your property for free versus having to hook it into your pressurized well system or run extra pumps just to move water around. And if you live in a state or county that allows you to collect rainwater, do it. That's a free resource that you can easily tap into and immediately get water security on your homestead. It can be as simple as putting a gutter along one edge of a building, putting a tank beneath it, or even a barrel, and you at least have some means of having and saving water in the event of a power outage where you can't run your well and get water out of the ground, or city water being shut down because there's a problem, what have you. When you are putting in underground infrastructure, keep in mind the possibility of future expansion. If you're digging a trench and you're putting conduit in to run power, or you're putting a pipe down there, it often doesn't cost much to just throw an extra run of empty conduit into that trench, or to run one more pipe, and then be able to hook up to the ends of that later on if you choose to. This can save you the cost of re-digging up that same trench or digging a new one and putting stuff underground when you were already there in the first place. So if you have any extra budget for that and you have any inkling of future expansion, go ahead and throw that pipe in the ground. Trust me, you will be glad you did. Now, a note on especially underground infrastructure: map, document, video, take pictures of everything. Once you backfill that trench, there's no way of knowing where that stuff is once it gets grown over or there's a road put back in place. You won't know where that trench is unless you documented it beforehand. This really saved my bacon on several occasions on our property where I actually recorded where things were, even if it was just taking my phone and just walking along the trench and just letting the camera see trees or buildings or roads or things that were nearby that I could use to triangulate a location of the end of a pipe that was buried underground, or where exactly a trench was, so I'd make sure not to hit it with a future excavation. Go ahead and map it out to scale if at all possible. This is another benefit of using a program like SketchUp. You can actually map out your infrastructure and write down exactly where things are. This will be super handy, trust me. If you have ever had to search for a septic tank lid in order to get your tank pumped out when it was overflowing, you will know that it is really handy to know exactly where that lid is ahead of time. Especially if it's in the dead of winter and you're really having to work hard to dig through that soil. If you ever knew in the past where that lid was located but you didn't document it, you will be kicking yourself the next time you have to dig it up. So another thing to keep in mind on your property, whether it's new or existing, is security. How secure do you feel on your property? Are you in an area where people steal things? Are there neighbors you're concerned about? Do you have kids and animals to keep track of? All of this comes into play as far as setting up security on your homestead. It can be as simple as putting up a single no trespassing sign at the end of your driveway. Thankfully, we're in a very rural area and we really don't have to worry about this a lot, but it is a definite consideration. So think about whether you want to have a gate at the beginning of your driveway or partway down your driveway, and how that's going to work. When you do put gates in, try to go as far as you can to the sides of the driveway or beyond. So especially if you plow snow in the wintertime, you're going to want to be able to have very easy free access through that gate and places to put snow on either side of it, so you're not fighting it and having a more and more closed in driveway, especially at that bottleneck of your gate. So keep that in mind. Now, one simple way of producing some security and privacy for your property is to make your driveway not just a straight shot from the road to your house, but make it do even just a gentle curve through some trees. This produces an amazing effect of hiding away from obvious view of the road your buildings, your animals, your supplies. So it gives you that privacy. It doesn't let people know on the road immediately what you have on that property, or if anybody even lives there. There's a lot of homes near us that I didn't even know existed simply because the driveway entrance did not reveal anything right off the bat. Okay, another thing to think about is fire protection. Both for your property and your neighbors, try to set up your place so that you minimize the potential for either producing fires and spreading them from your place, as well as protecting your home and outbuildings from any area fires. We live in a heavily wooded area, so this is very, very top of mind, especially in the hot times of the year. This is a big deal. It can even make the difference whether you are able to insure your home and property for homeowners insurance or not. So things to think about for this are clearing brush and shrubs and weeds that are anywhere near your house. Create kind of a safe zone where there's no burnable stuff. There's not at least a lot of dry, easily flammable material right near your home or outbuildings. This can also mean limbing up trees a little bit, just getting it so that there's 5 or 10 feet from the ground to the first branches on your trees that are at least around your home, and that can make a big difference to being able to protect it from fire. One thing I'm working on my property, I'm trying to store most of my fuel and other easily flammable materials slightly away from my main buildings that I care about the most, my house and my shop. Now, this is kind of counterintuitive because usually you have equipment in your shop that you need gas and oil and stuff to run and maintain, but it can actually be pretty dangerous, especially if you have a large stockpile of fuel on hand, which is wise if you live way out in the country and you need to be able to run a generator if the power's out, or be able to keep putting fuel into your plow truck to get through a blizzard. If you plan on having a lot of fuel on hand, think about where you're going to store that, and if it's really the wisest thing to store it in the building along with tractors and vehicles and lawnmowers and potentially some of the most valuable equipment you have on your property. What I did was take a busted up van box from a junkyard and I put it on my property on stilts and made that my flammable storage shed, basically, where I try to keep lawnmowers and extra cans of gas and bulk storage of oils and stuff like that, kerosene. I try to put that stuff in that shed, which is somewhat removed from the other buildings on my property, so that if that thing should ever catch fire, it's not an immediate threat to my household, and I'm also able to have the resources to fight that fire because it's not in the heart of everything else I have going on. Now, another thing to think about is water flow on your homestead, especially if you are in a place that gets a lot of rain or a lot of snow. You're going to deal with a lot of water in different periods of the year. This can be a big deal. I've had properties where my shop floor literally flooded every spring, and it was a major pain to deal with. Even the property I'm on right now, my shop floor is gravel currently, but it's on top of clay, and that thing is wet or at least damp for most of the year, and it's really a pain to deal with. Most of that comes from the fact that it was set down into the ground right along the path of a lot of drainage that naturally happens down the property. Almost our entire property is on at least a gradual slope, and there's a lot of drainage that happens in the winter and springtime. So that's a big thing I've had to deal with, was figuring out what to do with that water and where to send it. All right, the final piece of setting up our homestead is, where are you going to have gardens and animal areas? Now, in a permaculture regenerative mindset, a lot of these pieces are going to be working together throughout the life cycle that happens on your homestead every year. Now, this gets into these zones of things that are immediately close, right next to your house, should be the things that require the most attention and are things that you need to be kind of maintaining all the time, or at least keeping an eye on all the time. Stuff like keeping your main kitchen garden right close to your kitchen, so you can easily take produce straight into the house rather than having to move it, across the property. This can also be a great place to keep animals that require more attention or are mainly fed from kitchen scraps or things like that. You can incorporate a lot of waste streams and just flow of materials around your homestead if you kind of keep things in and close and contained. And then out from there, you have additional zones that require less and less attention and less maintenance. So try to set your homestead up to work with those models. I'm not a permaculture expert, so I can't coach you on that just yet, but there are a lot of people both on this summit as well as online to learn how best to set up your property for these purposes. The one thing I will say is, seek out southern slopes for gardening, or for building a greenhouse on, or for drying firewood. Anything that requires sun and lots of it, try to position on a slope that faces to the south, if you're in the northern hemisphere, obviously. One tool that I found really helpful for setting up a garden space is an app called Sun Seeker. It basically makes it so that on your smartphone you can figure out exactly where the sun is going to go, and even where your sunny spots and shady spots will be at any date throughout the year. This can save you years worth of observation, where normally you would have to just observe where it's shady and where it's sunny on your property throughout a whole year, and then keep track of that in your mind or on paper. Instead, you can just whip out this app, turn it on, and then map out the actual path that the sun is going to shine on and be shining from at any date throughout the year. This was really helpful in establishing where we put our high tunnel greenhouse, where we plan to build our future chicken run that will become a greenhouse eventually, and what we plant in our different garden beds. I owe a hat tip to Sean Mitzel of the Prepared Homestead for teaching me things like water drainage and micro trenching, and how easily you can manage water on your homestead, as well as that Sunseeker app. He showed me those things a couple summers back, and I am so grateful. They have been incredibly helpful to me. All right, friends, it's time to dive into the home and outbuilding repair section of this video. We all have different properties, we all have different buildings, but ultimately, what is the most important thing that a building does? What's its main job? Keeping you dry and keeping you sheltered from the elements, whether it's you or your animals or your tractor. One of the main aspects of that is keeping things dry. That is one of the most common problems on these fixer-upper properties that we find ourselves on as homesteaders, is roofs leak, pipes leak, floors flood, basements leak. Keeping things dry is of vital importance. If a leaky roof or a leaky pipe system doesn't get fixed soon enough, it can threaten the structure itself as it works at rotting away the wood frame of the structure, but it also can threaten our health. My family has dealt with years worth of health problems and thousands of dollars worth of repairs due to water damage, mostly from things that happened to properties before we owned them, and then we adopted those problems when we bought the place and had to fix them up over the years. Hugely important in moist climates down south, where mold will take off and just go crazy. Up here in this dry northern climate where we are in North Idaho, it can tend to be kind of put on the back burner of people's minds because we think it's not a big deal because it doesn't grow that terribly fast. But that's a dangerous mindset to have when you're dealing with your home where you live and spend hours and hours and hours of your life and of your family's life and of your children that you're going to have in there. They're breathing the air, they're low to the ground. Mold overlooked or not taken care of can really mess with your health. So that's one of the first things I'm going to jump on right now is if you find a leak in your roof, take care of it right away. If you have leaky pipes, fix it right away. If you have a leaky outbuilding, not as big a deal, but can become a really big deal. So fix it, jump on it, get that leak taken care of. I'm going to show you how to tighten some screws on the roof, but if you do have a shingled roof and have leaks going on, I would recommend you do a YouTube or Google search using the search terms shingle repair, composite roof patching pipe jacks or roof jacks, and also flashing. Here are two examples of loose screws on metal roofing that need to be tightened or replaced. So let's go ahead and take care of those now, and I'll show you how to do it. So the first thing to try is just to use a 1/4 inch driver on this kind of screw. See if you can just tighten it up. Actually, that one did pretty well, so I'm going to leave that the way it is. If you can go to a larger screw like this 5/16 thicker screw if the 1/4 inch size one is stripping out, but don't do it too soon, because once you go to this screw size, there's not really much you can do if this one were to start leaking. So I'm going to leave that one the way it is because that feels pretty tight now. Let's check this one out. So we've got another loose screw here. I'm going to see if it'll tighten up. Feels kind of, nope, that's stripped out. So what I'm going to do is replace that with a larger screw. I see this one's not great next to it as well. So I'm going to switch from my 1/4 inch drive to a 5/16, and I'm going to put one of these larger screws in here. The color doesn't match perfectly, but this is what I have right now, and nobody ever sees this side of the roof, so it really doesn't matter. I'd rather have a leak-free roof than it perfectly matching the color. That feels much better. It tightened up. It's going to provide a much better seal than certainly than that screw that was sticking up completely loose. See if it'll work for this one too. Yes, that feels great. So I have just fixed these two potential leak points in my roof just with a couple minutes and a couple screws. You'd be surprised how many times I've climbed up onto a roof to investigate the cause of a leak to find something as simple as loose screws. So don't be afraid of just going up and using your eyes to look around and see if you see a potential cause of the leak, and then you can fix it. That being said, if you aren't comfortable enough with roof repair to do it yourself, do hire it out. You know, watch some YouTube videos, try to learn from reputable sources who know what they're doing and have good reputations. But if after doing a little bit of research you're still not comfortable with being able to confidently fix the problem yourself, then bring in an area handyman or contractor and get that roof fixed. I'm going to show you some things that I have done over time that have really helped me through periods of remodel or temporary living situations that I haven't seen a lot of people do. What I'm talking about is a temporary kitchen. I took the old cabinets and countertops from part of our original kitchen and I just moved them over here into our dining room space. I had to elevate this section of countertop in order for the drain to clear the windowsill for the gray water going out. That's just watering part of our property. So I built a raised platform for that, but was able to install our dishwasher, kitchen sink, our stovetop over there that was part of that base cabinet that we took out. I knew that our kitchen remodel would take more than just a week or two to complete, so I knew we needed a fully functioning little kitchenette to get us through this time period without being too crippled by not being able to do simple things as wash dishes and sanitize them and cook food. This is the outside portion of our temporary kitchen. So we have supply water coming from a frost-free hydrant there and a garden hose, which comes up and transitions to PEX, goes into the house, goes over to a hot water heater that I just moved out onto the porch temporarily, and then hot water comes back and goes into the house and distributes from there. The power to the oven comes through this heavy-duty welder extension cord. I have a welder outlet wired there, so I can plug that extension cord. It snakes around here and goes in and is directly wired into our countertop inset stovetop right there. Then this is an extension cord coming from a GFCI outlet that's over on the power pole. 12 gauge extension cord pokes in through our boarded up window, goes to a power strip that's right here that we can plug kitchen things into. The reason I did that was it was a quick way for us to get GFCI protection to any electrical stuff that we do in the vicinity of our water, which is right here. The kitchen sink is right there. That's very important. It's a required thing in kitchens, but this is what the outdoor portion looks like. I simply opened the window, removed the screen, put a piece of plywood in place. I want to finish taping it around the perimeter, just helping keep mosquitoes and stuff out, but it seals pretty well the way it is right now. And I've sealed, as you can see, around all the holes that I've poked through there for pipes and stuff. And then this is just gray water. It's the drain from the kitchen sink and the dishwasher. It just drains out here, and I have it going around the side of the house to just drain out onto the property as gray water. So it's pretty simple. Water in, water out, a little bit of power in, and you have a temp kitchen. We've also got a temporary laundry setup here in our mid-remodel master bathroom. So we got washing machine here. It's plumbed from a cold water source. It's plugged into an extension cord from an outlet. And then I temporarily wired a 220 outlet here from where the dryer location used to be. And then I have the dryer there, and then we just have the dryer vent going out, some plywood in a window, and the drain for the washer that just goes outside and becomes gray water to water our lawn. It doesn't have to be complicated getting a washer and a dryer set up in a temporary way, but safe way, so that you can do laundry on site and not have to go to a laundromat the entire time you are remodeling. So I want to talk about the importance of caulking your shower and bathtub. When we bought this property, this shower surround was full of cracks and splits where it had been damaged, and water was starting to get in and delaminate it, and eventually would have caused water to get into the structure of the walls behind and potentially even the floor and really mess things up. So before we took any showers in here, I caulked it very thoroughly. It doesn't look the greatest, but my goal was waterproof. It didn't look great anyway because there were cracks, there were brown cracks where it was split open and inviting moisture in. But now those are covered with nice waterproof, mildew and mold resistant caulk. I could have used clear caulk, but it wouldn't have looked any better because it would have shown all the, the brown exposed material that was behind this. So I chose to just do it in white so I could see that I was really sealing everything well and wasn't leaving anything uncovered. We are eventually going to remodel this entire bathroom anyway because it needs it, but caulking the shower in this way at least gets us through a few years, stops whatever damage was happening before, and prevents all future damage from the date I caulked it forward. So do yourself a favor if you come into having a shower like this, or even a toilet on that's not sealed well to the floor, a sink, a vanity countertop that's not caulked to the wall behind it and water is getting down behind there. Take care of those things. Just get some good caulk that is for kitchen and bath waterproof situations. Make sure it's mold and mildew resistant, and seal that puppy up. Well, now I'm going to go over some improvements I've made to popular chicken tractor models. Behind me is a John Suscovich style. All of these improvements just help the overall efficiency and ease of use. So let's just jump right into those improvements and how you can do them on your chicken tractors. Starting with this Suscovich style chicken tractor, probably the most visibly different is the door that tucks right into the curved top of the A-frame roof instead of having the square framing. I'll get to that in a minute. The next readily evident is these skids. They are 1/2-inch conduit, EMT conduit, just like are used for the roof, but they're just made to go under the entire length of the skids and then wrap up and attach to the frame. So here's the finished product with the full skid installed. The joint happens like this. Oh, I need to just beat that a little bit. That's better, a little finessing with a hammer. So now I just need to add a skid to that other side. It's about 15 feet worth of conduit per side. It makes it a lot easier to slide over the ground, even without putting the wheels on the back. I've done different versions of these skids, starting with the A-frame chicken tractor. Those skids are a little shorter. I just didn't, it was kind of the first iteration of that idea to make it slide easier along the ground. After building that though, I realized that I should really lengthen the amount that the conduit comes away from the main base frame, so that when you lift up on one end, it'll pivot further back here as if it was on the wheels, and therefore lift this back frame piece a little bit higher off the ground than if the skid was, you know, starting to curve up right there. I also did it on my Salatin style tractor. Those stick out further and that works really well. I almost never have to use wheels to move this chicken tractor just because of how much that lengthened skid helps lift that back frame piece off of the ground. So another thing that I've done to improve both this and my Salatin style tractors is this handle. All it is a 1/2-inch plumbing pipe, just a, you know, galvanized pipe that I pulled out of an old remodel, and then on each end it goes to a 90-degree elbow, and then a short nipple, and then a 1/2-inch T, and then another section of pipe or nipple, and it's just put together so that the fittings are at this angle. Essentially the middle part of the T faces straight up. It sits pointing straight up when it's laying on the ground like that. So that goes so that it can slip under these bolts, and these bolts are drilled in the same location as the Suscovich instructions say. So it's 1 3/4 from the end and down from the top. I just added some additional hardware to the bolt here. All we do, we have a flat washer that goes on first, and then a little just short scrap section of conduit, another flat washer, and then a 1/2-inch wing nut. So that just goes on finger tight, and like I said, that conduit section will just protect the threads. So I added some additional pieces of wood there, a little scrap of 2x4 plus a piece of scrap plywood. Get it in there just above the T, and then as you pry down on the handle, you push down, it lifts up till it seats itself into position right there. That plywood just protects the wire and makes it all work. I don't take the handle on and off every time I move it. I just drop it on the ground and it's ready for the next move the next morning. But I can remove it and put it on the back of the tractor if I want to move the other direction. Another modification I did was lengthening the front of the skid by 4 inches, and that's to accommodate for the wheels being able to install either here or here. Both sides are identical. Another thing I did was attach the tarp differently. I didn't have eyelets in all the right spots to be able to zip tie it to the frame. They didn't want to add grommets and mess with all that. So I just took some wood lath and I just screw it, I just sandwich it through. I have screws coming from the outside into some scrap wood on the inside. It's a very simple, effective method. And then I did the same thing here on these vertical legs. I just screwed some wood lath on, same along the bottom. I'd say the improvement that I like the most as far as the aesthetics goes is the change I made to the door. So before I put the tarp on this, I want to show the details of how this is all fastened together. So you have 1x4 just butts into this bottom, and then I have just scraps. That is a kind of a half lap joint there, and then it is in the same plane as this conduit, so it tucks under it. Then I have another piece of 1x4 that just goes behind. It's just cut with a jigsaw to the right curve. So that's how it goes together. And then the door tucks right in there to be flush inside the conduit frames. I believe this is probably a 2-inch screw and then 3-inch, 3-inch. And I did that one reason was just for looks. It looks nice and clean and trim. The other reason though is for if I want to put a metal or plastic roof on here, like a corrugated roof, or even just a section on the top here, and if I wanted to extend it out past the frame, then the door is not going to interfere with that. It's going to tuck underneath anything that happens with the roof, as opposed to a square frame sticking up out here like is shown in the plans, where you would be able to just butt the roof up to the back side of that, but it is always going to be, that frame is always going to be out exposed to the weather. Depending on what I end up using this chicken tractor for, like once these meat birds are done and we're into winter, I may even extend this roofing out a little ways to give me a little sheltered area. When I first built the frame, hey buddy, you're being loud. You're being really loud. Go drink your snack. It's still out there. When I first built the frame for this chicken tractor, I was still recovering from a dislocated shoulder. So I was limited to how much I used my skill saw and hammer and chisel and all that. So I elected to just put it all together with pocket screws, as opposed to half lapping the joints, kind of like this. That's the only part, right here and right here, the only parts on this whole chicken tractor where I did you know, cut and chisel it out like that. Everywhere else is just a simple pocket screw joint. Those are very easy to put together with a simple Craig jig tool. I didn't have to spend a long time cutting away and chiseling away. I just screwed it all together. So far it's holding up really well. All of my lumber is just used lumber. It's non-treated Doug fir. It's not cedar or anything. Because it was old and weathered, it splits, you know, more easily than brand new lumber. I didn't want to mess with reducing the thickness of it to half to 3/4 thickness on long, you know, important structural rails like this is, because that would create a weak spot. I just kept the full strength and I just screwed it in with the pocket screws, and it works so far really well. In all of my chicken tractors, I've hung feeders and waterers with wire as opposed to string, because I like the longevity and adjustability of that. And then I can also make it quickly attach and detach. Quick release, basically. So my waterer hangs right here. Right now I just unhooked it. I brought it outside so I can clean it and fill it up, and then I just hook it right back on again. So this is another example of a solid handle that I put on this more Salatin style tractor. I just screwed it through with a bolt right there through the frame, and then a nut, a washer and a nut on the inside. That basically makes it so that it pivots right on there. It's permanently attached, and I just pick it up and pull. But I added a board on the top here as a stop. That makes it so when I'm pull the chicken tractor, I'm in full control of what's going on. I can sort of push it backward also if I need to, but say if I'm going down a hill, it won't race toward me every time I lift it up. And I also, my toes are, I can stay far away from the chicken tractor, and I'm not having to tippy toe right close to it like I would if I just had a rope to hold on to. I've got a fix for the all too common problem of these Justin Rhodes style nest boxes falling out. So though I love this nest box system, that's why I put it in this old remodeled chicken tractor, there is that problem where it's only held in by the front and back rails, and it can have a tendency to have this bottom part just slip over the edge and fall down like that. So especially with our kids checking that for eggs, they'll often, not have it seated all the way. Then it doesn't take much for a chicken to jump in and have it fall down. So now on to the fix. All I did was use 4 3-inch screws per nest box. There's about 2 inches of the screw sticking out. You can see how far down I set the screws, roughly 3/4 of an inch or so. It's not going to actually rest on these screws yet, so they aren't holding it from being fully seated. All they're there for is just a safety. What happens if the nest box comes loose is it just falls and gets caught on those screws. And they're strong enough to hold the chicken in there, no problem. The chickens could get in and out, lay eggs all they wanted to, and those nest boxes would not fall out. A benefit of doing just these screws instead of putting mesh or hardware cloth or something under here is poop and straw and stuff needs to just freely fall out the bottom of these nest boxes. It'll all just drain out the bottom. Go ahead and try it on your nest box system and see how it works for you. But so far, like I said, I have not had a single bird escape. I've often found the nest boxes unseated, but it hasn't been, I haven't had any issues. I'm going to introduce you to one of the most helpful tools I have for lifting awkward, heavy items by myself. All it is a trailer tongue jack. This one is rated at 5,000 pounds, and it mounts onto a welded on tube that goes onto your trailer tongue, and that much is stock. And then all I did was add an adapter to it that I made out of 2 pieces of C-channel. I welded them together very securely so it's very sturdy, and I just cut off this extra lip that used to be on this C-channel, and then I cut this hole out to slip over this jack, and then a simple hose clamp to go around the base to hold it all together. The biggest benefit of these is the fact that you can get way down low. Literally, I could lower this all the way down to the ground. I call these Paul Bunyan finger jacks because it's as if I have Paul Bunyan's fingers at my disposal. Basically, if you can stick fingers under something, you can jack it up to a few thousand pounds. I've gotten under freezers with this. I've gotten under pianos. I've gotten under concrete slabs. I've used these to jack up posts, to temporarily jack up a structure while I put in permanent posts, or improved on a structure, fixing it up. I've used this just countless times. If you've got some metalworking tools and skills and want a handy jack to have around your homestead, make yourself one of these adapters. Get a jack like this if you don't already have one. Go ahead and go heavy. Get one rated at 5,000 pounds, a good amount of weight. Don't do one with the top winding crank up here, because it'll just get in the way of whatever you're trying to lift. Use a side winder. It'll be much more useful and do you good for many years. While we're on the topic of homemade tools that can make your homesteading life easier, I'd like to show you the Paul Bunyan wood chopper. This is a simple machine that anyone can build with basic metalworking skills and a few simple tools. Its basic function is that it uses a very heavy splitting head suspended by a car suspension spring. Now, a standard splitting maul is about 8 pounds. What this machine does is it enables you to use a 95-pound splitting maul, but you don't have to lift it. The spring does that for you. You also don't have to aim it like you do a regular maul or axe. Because it's rigidly mounted in this frame, it always strikes in exactly the same spot on the table. All you have to do is hold the wood in place and guide the splitting head down. You do put strength into the downswing, but the main force behind it is the momentum of that 95 pounds, which is why it splits the wood so easily. If the wood gets stuck, all you have to do is lift it back up again and hit it until the wood splits all the way through. Also, unlike other common log splitters, this one doesn't require a gas engine or electrical motor. No fuel is required, no oil changes, no spark plugs, no hydraulic filters and hoses to change. It functions quietly and it's always ready for you to use. Now, there are a bunch of these types of log splitters on YouTube, mainly showing up on Ukrainian and Russian channels. But if you've watched very many of those videos, one thing quickly becomes clear. Every single design is different, and some of them really don't work all that well. So what I did over the past 4 years was watch every single video I could find on this type of log splitter and carefully observe which design aspects worked well and which ones actually made it function worse. Then I made this prototype combining all the best design aspects I had seen, plus adding a bunch of my own. Now, as simple as this looks, there are a lot of design aspects that all come together to make this work well and be easy to operate and maintain. Up to this point, there has not been a central place online to discuss all these things that make a DIY build like this as successful as it can be. That's why I started the Manual Log Splitter Design Group on Facebook. My hope is that this will become a strong community where we can share photos and videos of our builds and encourage each other through the whole process from design to fabrication. That'll take some time though, because I just started the group, so it'll take people a little while to discover it. In the meantime, my goal is to make this the most informative place in the world for people planning to build this kind of log splitter. If you're interested in building one of these yourself, don't go it alone. Come join the Manual Log Splitter Design Group and take advantage of all the research and trial and error experimentation that your fellow DIYers have done. This will save you tons of time and money on your own build, plus you'll get to your end goal sooner, being able to split your firewood more easily, safely, and efficiently.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to check out the other summit videos as well. They'll be available for a limited time on the Green Dream Project YouTube channel. Remember to check out the links in the video description for more information on our speakers and to find out how to get access to all the summit videos to watch anytime.